Testing. Yeah. This congregation joins with other UUs in the tradition of striking the gong 3 times. Once in memory of those who have gone before, once in honor of those here today, and once for the future. Sean. Good morning and happy Mother's Day. And everyone can be a mother. Dads? No, everybody takes care of kids, don't they? Yeah. And people have cats and dogs. I've been a cat mother. I've been a dog mother. So, mothering is for everybody. Welcome to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Congregation, the church that puts its faith in you. It's a place where you can be yourself, but not by yourself. Whomever you are, whoever you love, and however you describe yourself or name the holy, you are welcome here. I'm Martha Sinkula, and I'll be your service leader today. We are so glad that you are with us today. I especially welcome those watching from home, and also those of you who might be visiting for the first time. Those of you who are here, please stay after service for coffee and tea and conversation so we can get to know each other better. If you have one of these with you, please turn it off. I made that announcement a couple of weeks ago and then my phone went off. It was quite fun. So I'm going to do it right now. Well, maybe not. I want to thank John Asham, who is our greeter today. Thank you, John. And I want to thank all the people that helped get us together. Sean with the music, Jake with the media, Jen in the office, Annan for the kiddos. And thank you, Connie, for those beautiful flowers. Again, thanks everyone who are with us today for caring to keep this important place vital. Also, we have some announcements. If you'll take a look in your order of service, there are things that are happening. If you'd like to purchase a Side with Love t-shirt, they are on the way. The order form, the list is in the back to sign up. We are going to be joining the Roseburg Pride March, and tell me quickly again. June 4th. We're going to go forth on June 4th. And we'll be marching. Where do we start?
There'll be a roped off area for everyone from UU, from Roseburg and Eugene, and we'll walk down the main street of town.
Main Street, Jackson? Jackson?
No, probably
Main Street. Okay, Main Street, somewhere. We'll have to find them. Also, we might make an announcement. Our beloved Connie, who thought she had COVID, did not really have COVID. somehow the test, she was very, very, thank you, Connie, for that. She was very good about getting a test because she didn't feel well. And she was wrong. So we're glad that you're here and that you're, huh? What did you say?
I said, I'm never wrong.
Whatever. You're perfect just the way you are. So take a look at all these things. There's all kinds of things happening here. We also acknowledge the people who came before us on this land called the Umpqua, for the river that flows through it, and the name that graces our congregation. Here for thousands of years, loving this land and living in harmony, the Umpqua are still giving us gifts of action and wisdom. We make this land acknowledgement in recognition of the Umpqua and in the beginning of an atonement for the harms done, part of the path towards healing. We're delighted to again have Reverend Dennis Reynolds speaking today. As you know, he's here as a quarter-time developmental minister. His office hours are Tuesdays 1 to 4, and he brings an extensive ministerial background, humor and insight, and is eager to meet and work with all of us. As I said, please take a look, if you will, when you have time at our order of service and our various things that are going on. One of the things that Genevieve is asking is she is looking for clipboards. If anybody has an extra clipboard at home that you no longer are using, maybe you brought it home from the office when you retired. I have a couple. I will bring them because we seem to need them. And if someone in the back, maybe John, would you turn the fans on? It's getting a little warm in here. Thank you. And at this time, we will take our collection for fish. The Fish Food Pantry is a part of, we're part of about 7 churches that help support it in our compassion for those in need and our congregation service to the larger Roseburg community. So Annan and Lily, would you like to get a couple of baskets and pass those out? Thank you.
We begin our service with the chalice lighting. The words this morning are from Theodore Parker, 19th century Unitarian minister. And we'll wait for the baskets to come on back up, and then we'll share some words.
Let's put those
and
over.
light the
Thank you, ladies.
chalice. Thank you.
BR is a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere.
It's temple, all space.
Its shrine, the good heart.
It's creed, all truth.
Its ritual, works of love.
It's profession of faith, divine living. I invite you now to rise in body and in spirit for our opening hymn. It's number 347 in the hymnal, and the lyrics will be projected as well.
Witness the mystery of this hour.
used to be a member of the Eugene Church back in the day may, like I do, remember a voice singing that song. Jim Scott, the songwriter, was a member of the Eugene Church for many years. And so every time I sing that song, I kind of hear Jim's voice in my ear as well. So we are gifted in a relatively small movement to actually know more people out of the bigger picture that is Unitarian Universalism. So I have a story I want to share this morning. I'm going to move Martha's little booster out of the way because I don't need it. And it's a Mother's Day story. And when I talked to Sean this week via the magic of technology, we came up with a notion. There's a little part of the story that invites us to join in song. And this time we actually have a melody, not some little thing we would make up in our head, but we have a songwriter who's crafted a little melody. Some of you may know the story. It's Love You Forever, a Robert Munsch, illustrated by Sheila McGraw. If you want to, anybody who wants to see the pictures a little better is invited to move closer. There's some empty chairs in the front. Or I'll leave the book laying around. Or if you want to take it downstairs, it's here. Okay? Want to do a little melody first?
Forever, like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be. I love you forever, I like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be.
A mother held her new baby and very slowly rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she held him, she sang,
I love you forever, like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be.
The baby grew and grew and grew. He grew until he was 2 years old, and he ran all around the house. He pulled all the books off the shelves. He pulled all the food out of the refrigerator, and he took his mother's watch and flushed it down the toilet. In contemporary times, that would likely be a cell phone in the toilet. Sometimes his mother would say, "This kid is driving me crazy." But at nighttime, when that 2-year-old was quiet, she opened the door to his room, crawled across the floor, looked up over the side of his bed, and if he was really asleep, she picked him up and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she rocked him, she sang,
I love you forever, I like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be.
The little boy grew. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was 9 years old, and he never wanted to come in for dinner. He never wanted to take a bath. And when Grandma visited, he always said bad words. Sometimes his mother wanted to sell him to the zoo. But at nighttime, when he was asleep, the mother quietly opened the door to his room, crawled across the floor, and looked up over the side of the bed. If he was really asleep, she picked up that 9-year-old boy and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she rocked, she sang,
I love you forever, I like you for always, as long as I'm living, my baby you'll be.
The boy grew He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was a teenager. He had strange friends, he wore strange clothes, and he listened to strange music. Sometimes his mother felt like she was in a zoo. But at nighttime, when that teenager was asleep, the mother opened the door to his room, crawled across the floor, and looked up over the side of the bed. If he really was asleep, she picked up that great big boy and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. While she rocked him, she sang,
I love you forever. I like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be.
That teenager grew. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was a grown-up. He left home and got a house across town. But sometimes on dark nights, the mother got into her car and drove across town. Some people call this overparenting. But if all the lights in her son's house were out, she opened his bedroom door, crawled across the floor, looked up over the side of his bed. If that great big man was really asleep, she picked him up and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she rocked him, she sang,
I love you forever. I like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be.
well, that mother, she got older. She got older and older and older. One day she called her son and said, "You'd better come see me because I'm very old and sick." So her son came to her. When he came in the door, she tried to sing the song, I like you for always. But she couldn't finish because she was too old and sick. The son went to his mother. He picked her up and rocked her back and forth, and he sang this song.
I love you forever. I like you for always. As long as I'm living, my you'll be.
When the son came home that night, he stood for a long time at the top of the stairs. Then he went into the room where his very new baby daughter was sleeping. He picked her up in his arms and very slowly rocked her back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while he rocked, he sang,
I love you forever. I like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you to all who nurture and love and care for others. And we'll sing out a little one to go downstairs and do some stuff other than hang out and listen to a sermon. Let's do that song. Sean, let's just do this song. Just sing this little one downstairs, okay? And so we'll skip over that other slide back there, Jake, because this one's a better one for today. We're going to skip this one. We're going to do the live one. Okay, ready? I love
You forever.
Okay, now we're ready.
I love you forever. I like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be.
Okay, Martha, circle of life. I threw a last-minute change in there on him. So this is, this is part of how you nurture each other.
Now is the time in our service where we light a candle for joys and concerns in our life. And if those of you at home would like to join in, please do so to honor someone that you'd like to honor. If you want to light a candle, both silent or spoken, please form a line over here behind John, and I will get the candles and we'll go forth. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work. We are so grateful for this and commit together to ensure funds that we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than they could have done alone. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation, and may we give in love and in hope. For the gifts for which we have received, may we be truly grateful. And may we be committed to using these gifts to make a difference in the world and expand our beloved community. Thank you.
It's rather ironic that as paid staff to this congregation, I'm the one who wants to skip over offerings sometimes. It's like, I'm glad it's not the old days, though. Used to be the offering was taken after the sermon. And that's what the minister would take home. But in these times, Unitarian Universalist ministers do not take a vow of poverty. We establish contracts. But moving beyond the mundane and those issues of money, I invite you to center yourself and move within. The meditation I want to share this morning is, we'll do it in the form of first some words from the Reverend Mark Bellatini, and then with the chime, I'll invite you into a time of silence. I thought I had the page marked, but my sticker broke out. Just give me a moment. before and after the reading. Ah, it's true. When our ancestors spoke of heaven, they were speaking of this moment. When they went on about nirvanas, they imagined a time like this. When they sang of paradise, it was this morning they imagined. And when all the mysteries of life and death are blended, a community of praise. When the bones of ancient lovers are given flesh again in our own bodies. Teachers of long ago speaking of love and truth, once more in life so ordinary, they are extraordinary. Blessed is our breath, in and out, quiet. Blessed is our sitting, our fidgeting, our movement. Blessed is our heartbeat, echoing the pounding alleluias of the distant stars. Blessed is the silence that is presence, not absence. I invite you now into a silent time of shared presence.
From one light, many flames are burning bright. From one heart, all love has made its start. From one spark, light burst forth into the dark. In empty empty space, all creation then took place. Hallelujah. 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 From one sound, music echoes all around. With one word, all the sea of life was stirred. With one breath, Spirit quickened all the earth. From one life, many souls then came alive. Sing with me. Hallelujah. From one thought, all God's handiwork was wrought. With God's will, all this garden is blooming still. Hallelujah. From many streams, rivers flow into the sea. From many souls, we shall merge into the whole. Hallelujah. 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 from many lands reaching out, we'll all join hands. From far apart, we'll be gathered in one heart. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Thank you, sir. We have a reading to share, Martha. The reading we're going to share as we move into a time of spoken words is in the back of your hymnal. It's number 566. We're going to do it antiphonally. And Martha, you want to just go ahead and take that mic, and I'll stay right here. Antiphonally, I shared here, some months back, is an alternative to responsive readings. Responsive readings are those that were written and intended that some, worship leader or leadership person like a minister up here would read part of it, and you would respond, and we do kind of a call and response kind of thing. Antiphonally means you read it to each other. So I'll lead this half of the room in the regular type, and Martha will lead that half of the room in responding to the italics. And I want to give a little background in terms of this reading is from the 16th century Unitarian preacher and teacher Francis David. It's titled God is One. And as the title tells us, David used the word God to name the holy. And that word was used in our hymn. Now, for some, this is a name which calls them into a place of acceptance and grace. For others, it can surface echoes of patriarchal judgment and shame. So you have embraced within different words. Use the word that names the holy for you when we come to that part of the reading. Be that word love, or God, or spirit, or no word at all. So let's begin the reading. God is one. In this world, there have always been many questions about faith and salvation.
You need not think alike to love alike.
There must be knowledge in faith also.
Sanctified reason is the lantern of faith.
Religious reform can never be all at once, but gradually, step by step.
If they offer something better, I will gladly learn.
The most important spiritual function is conscience, the source of all spiritual joy and happiness.
Conscience will not be quieted by anything less than truth and justice.
We must accept God's truth in this lifetime. Salvation must be accomplished here on earth.
God is indivisible.
Ege az Isten.
God is one.
Thank you. Now, David reminded us way back then that in this world there have always been questions about faith and salvation. He follows this with a possible unifying answer to such questions. You need not think alike to love alike. He goes on to invite us to articulate knowledge and faith, to use reason as though a lantern light, to answer a call for truth and justice and salvation to be accomplished here on earth. All this sounds like something you might hear a present-day Unitarian Universalist affirm from this pulpit or any other on a Sunday morning. And here on this sunny day, with the forecast telling us it will be very hot, we affirm those truths. Now, in his time, David never thought that the theology he affirmed would expand into an increasingly widening questioning of what the very words faith and salvation mean, and that Unitarianism would become an expansive and open faith that accepts and celebrates a wide range of possibilities as to how one might name the holy. My friends, the questioning and changes have been at the core of our religious tradition throughout a long history. This is the central theme in the continually unfolding story of Unitarian Universalism. When David named the holy as God, he used that name in his affirmation that divinity is one. Whatever you call it, God, Goddess, Allah, Lord Krishna, or Kali, or Jehovah, or Elohim, or Jah, or Isis, or the Creator, or the ground of being. However you label that which you find holy and most deeply meaningful. When we lift up any of those names, we are exploring the same thing. Ege Az Izen. God is one. Now, Unitarian has long been the name given to such a belief. God, or however named the holy, is universal. David's affirmation, we need not think alike to look alike, is also central in Universalist theology, or Universalist philosophy, if you prefer that name. I want to share just a bit more about that wise seer, Francis David, or David Ferenc, as he would have been known in his native Hungarian. He was born in 1510 and died in 1579. Yeah, 15. Right? He was the court preacher to King Sigismund, who was king of Hungary and the ruling prince of Transylvania, which is now part of Romania. Now, Transylvania is unfortunately better known for another ruler, Vlad the Impaler, a ruthless leader whose brutality in war against the Mughals inspired the stories about the vampire Count Dracula. Though Vlad lived and ruled a century earlier, the dark story of his rule and the mythical horror tale it inspired is unfortunately far better known than that of the enlightened Sigismund. Now, this royal leader had the wisdom and openness to heed the teachings of his brilliant spiritual guide, Francis David. In 16th century Europe, each nation typically had a state religion, and it was usually whatever the king or queen believed and chose to follow. Now, though Europe was predominantly Christian, there were deep and often brutal conflicts between the Roman Catholic Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, and various sects of Protestant. Divisions were not merely debates. They often led to open warfare with wars that lasted 30 or even 100 years. Sigismund saw another way. In 1568, under his leadership, the Edict of Torda was proclaimed. It read, "In every place the preachers shall preach and explain the gospel, each according to their understanding of it, and if the congregation likes it, well. If not, no one shall compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied, but they shall be permitted to keep a preacher whose teachings they approve. No one shall be reviled for their religion by anyone. And it's not permitted that anyone should be threatened by imprisonment. For faith is a gift of God." Now, this radical idea of religious freedom, of a free pulpit and freedom of religion for all, became for a time the law of the land. I said for a time because John Sigismund was succeeded by a Catholic named Stephen Barthori, who dismissed most of the Unitarians at court. He implemented what I would call a don't ask, don't tell approach to religion, wherein one's belief could believe what one chose as long as you didn't talk about it. Francis David was invited, more than invited, he was strongly urged to keep silent. But this was not David's way. He continued to preach and to question. Barthori ordered him to stop. When he did not stop, David was arrested and tried for the crime of innovation. Yes, the crime was innovation. David was found guilty of innovation and condemned to prison for the remainder of his life. He died in the royal dungeon in the castle at Diva on November 15th, 1579. Not long after his death, the ideas of religious tolerance and openness moved into a state of deep dormancy throughout most of Europe. This spirit of intolerance or any opposition to the religion of the state or of the king, as it was manifest in England, was what led to the persecution of English Puritans, who proposed what might be called innovations within the Church of England. As we know, this in time led those religious innovators to travel to what was then called the New World. They landed at what we now call Plymouth, Massachusetts. Here on this continent, they instituted not religious tolerance, but rather established their faith as the mandatory religion of what was then the theocracy of Massachusetts. Well, that did not continue, and in a time a split grew within that movement, with would-be innovators embracing an idea of the unity and the oneness of God. Unitarianism reemerged both in England and in Massachusetts, and in time here there was a split. Two faiths emerged, the Trinitarian Congregational Church and the Unitarian Church of America. Unitarianism had emerged once again, for ideas do not die, though sometimes they may be dormant for a long time. By the late 1700s and early 1800s, Unitarian churches had become the dominant denomination in New England. You can travel there now, and there's the first, second, third, fourth, whatever church of many New England cities, and they're all Unitarian or now Unitarian Universalists. Meanwhile, in the early decades of the let me finish this part, I'll come back to that. Then in the early decades of the 19th century, a new generation of innovators emerged within Unitarianism. They were called the Transcendentalists. The most well-known amongst them is Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson, for a couple of years, was a Unitarian minister, We claim it as ours, but we sometimes forget that he only lasted for 2 years because he had a doctrinal dispute between himself and his congregation because they wanted him regularly to do communion services, a practice he thought was rather outdated. So they parted ways. Now, in spite of the fact that he left the active church, Emerson's teaching, particularly a growing distance from the traditional Bible-centered Christianity, shaped a whole generation of Unitarian ministers whose influence shapes us still. Amongst them who heard Emerson speak was Theodore Parker, who we were reminded this morning called for a religion which, like sunshine, goes everywhere. Its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love, its profession of faith, divine living. In short, a religion that is open, that centers a good heart and calls us to put love into action. Meanwhile, in the early days of that century, another faith was emerging in New England. While the rational and often educated Unitarians gathered in most of the cities and larger towns of New England, itinerant preachers were traveling through the rural areas and the small villages. They preached a doctrine clearly and deeply centered on love. For in the then young America, a movement called the Great Awakening had swept the land. Methodists and Baptists and others preached a doctrine that centered God's judgment and assured damnation for unrepentant sinners. A growing cadre of itinerant preachers began to spread a different message, a message about God's love and assurance of universal salvation for all. Thus the name Universalism. As the early American Universalist John Murray advised, Universalism sought to give them not hell, but hope and courage, invited all to preach the kindness and everlasting love of God. Hosea Ballou, one of that cadre of itinerant preachers and later an important leader in the growing movement, preached, "If we agree in love, there is no disagreement that can do us injury, but if we do not, no other agreement will do us any good." Such a teaching for me is closely aligned with David's. You need not think alike to love alike. The notion of all-encompassing divine love had emerged earlier in Christianity, notably in the writings of a 3rd century theologian called Origen of Alexandria. Yet such teachings were declared heresy in the Council of Nicaea in 325. Yet ideas do not die. They only become dormant, sometimes for a long time. In the 19th and earliest 20th century America, ideals of universalism and universal love flourished, and so too did the Universalist Church of America. At one time, it was one of the larger denominations in the U.S. But then, when other mainline Christian denominations embraced such love-centered theologies, the church declined in influence and in numbers. So too did the American Unitarian Association, and so in 1961, these two faith traditions, Universalism and Unitarianism, merged to become the Unitarian Universalist Association, recognizing that they shared a belief in love as central to faith and a shared commitment to justice. Through the years, both before and after the merger, our faith tradition established various statements attempting to articulate those beliefs. Many seem to echo those notions articulated long ago by Francis David, an emphasis on reason and conscience and the centrality of love. David, remember, had also affirmed, if they offer something better, I will gladly listen. Such a sentiment is key to understanding the intention of the proposed revisions to our UU bylaws that I shared here last month. If you haven't seen the April 9th sermon, you could log back in for some filler about some gaps that may emerge in the message today. We're being offered in that presentation revision of our bylaws and our statement of belief a new articulation. An articulation that envisions an evolving 21st century Unitarian Universalism. Rather than a continuing commitment to our beloved 7 principles on the wall there and on the back of our order of service, we're being offered an alternative set of values. Jake, this is where I'd like to have them have the slide to take a look at. This is what we talked about last time. Values articulated not just in words, but in image. And it emphasizes the centrality of love. And then that list of values, justice, interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, and generosity, are different articulations to the same values we lifted up in our principles. So, as Unitarian Universalists, we are and are inspired by a sacred and secular understanding that helps us to live out these values. And we respect the histories, I jumped ahead. We're also offered an alternative in the listing of numerous sources we draw from the statements of as statements of inspiration. Jake, we can lose the slide. This statement that's proposed to replace the listing of sources, which is in the first of our hymnal, which we don't print every week, but I advise you to take a look at them, basically says, the new statement, as Unitarian Universalists, we use and are inspired by sacred and secular understandings that help us to live into our values. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which they were created and are currently practiced. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. Grateful for the religious ancestries we inherit and the diversity which enriches our faith, we are called to deepen and expand our wisdom. Let me read that one again. As Unitarian Universalists, we use and are inspired by sacred and secular understandings that help us to live our values. We respect the histories, contexts, and cultures in which they were created and are currently practiced. These sources ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. Grateful for the religious ancestors we inherit and the diversity which enriches our faith, we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. If these proposed changes are approved at General Assembly and then reaffirmed next year, they would replace the principles and the list of sources from which we might now choose to pick and choose. The current sources include our direct experience, teachings from prophetic people, wisdom from all the world's religions, our Judeo-Christian heritage, humanism and reason, and the foundational teachings of interconnection drawn from the natural world. We are gifted with the new inclusive statement that includes all that and any additional sacred and secular understandings that help any of us to live into our values. I think the key word is all, which includes all the options on that old list and an open-ended possibility of whatever and underlies and strengthens your deepest values, whatever the source. I find a particular source of the new statement is the new labeling of them as inspirations, as to that which deeply inspires you. In addition, the phrase respect for the histories, contexts, and cultures in which they were created and are currently practiced encourages us to not simply adapt or adopt as our own sacred traditions and practices from traditions that are not our own. The due statement of inspirations reminds us that it is these sources that ground us and sustain us in ordinary, difficult, and joyous times. Finally, we recognize in this 21st century articulation our deep gratitude for what has come before. Recognizing that, as the 20th century UU theologian James Luther Adams, sometimes called JLA, advised, there is no such thing as the Immaculate Conception of an idea. I want to repeat that one. That's one of my favorite Unitarian Universalist theological teachings. There's no such thing as the Immaculate Conception of an idea. They were. Therefore, we are. And we are called to ever deepen and expand our wisdom. Closer to home, this congregation, which came into being in the 20th century, is answering the call to continue to grow and change. This faith community, like its members, has matured and deepened its spirituality. And yet, it has remained true to its mission, which is also printed on the back of each week's order of service, reminding us to create and maintain a diverse, caring community that encourages ethical, intellectual, and spiritual growth. How this is manifest here and in 1,000+ UU congregations across the continent, around the globe, changes and evolves with the times, and yet down through the century holds to core notions of openness and love. Change in our living tradition continues, for as David Frankel advised us, religious reform can never be all at once, but step by step, and we're in the middle of such steps, my friend. May we remain open to such a calling and be open to something better, something new, to new learnings. Sometimes new learning. Be it about being respectful of inclusive pronouns or avoiding cultural appropriation, seeking and actualizing notions of radical inclusion, and staying open to changing ourselves is difficult work. But such is the call of our faith tradition, our living tradition. For as James Luther Adams also reminds us, a living tradition is not bequeathed through some law of inheritance. It must be earned, but not without dust and heat, and not without humbling grace. So let us continue on this shared journey with such grace and with love. A love that has existed since before the beginning and will never let you go. May it be so. You want to, any comments, thoughts, or if you choose to sit with it, that's okay too. We are who we are. We like dialogue.
Now it's our turn to
Yeah,
respond. I'm going to come right here to Betsy.
I thought a lot about how what Jesus meant when he gave us what we call the Lord's Prayer. And I asked a German-speaking friend what the tense was in her language, and she looked puzzled for a minute, and she said, the present tense. So try it. Our Father who is in heaven. And I won't repeat what I go but through, but that's how I say that prayer.
Right. Well, and we have the freedom, we could choose to substitute, our Holy Parent in something that's not as fully gendered, or, today, our mother who is present with us, yeah, there's multiple articulations. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's very thought-provoking, your sermon, and I really appreciate the history that you give us in that as well. And the idea of change and staying open to change is something I try to do all the time. And I wonder where this new proposal originated in terms of the thought that we needed to now change the way that the principles are, and just how that occurred.
Well, a little bit of the more recent history, there was another set of proposed changes that went to General Assembly in 2009 and were voted down. And part of the impetus for another change that came forward and a commission was established in 21, came out of some of the dissensions and the split that's happened within the larger movement. I mean, I've shared here from the pulpit one of the earlier times I was here. I think originally 14 and then a few others have gathered. Members of the Unitarian Universalist Minister Association resigned their membership in the association. There is now a proposal for something, I think they're calling it the National Unitarian Association, that would split off of UUA. And this is a tough word to use with Unitarian Universalists. It's a more conservative part of our movement. And last year at General Assembly, which I went and got a delegate credential, which I'm entitled to have as an emeritus minister from Whidbey, just so I could vote against this individual who ran for the board. And in her election statement called for the young people, all those folks who are talking about trans rights and stuff, they should start a 21st century Unitarian Universalist. So they called for those who called for change to go away. And that's part of what led to, okay, let's review how we articulate who we are in these times and who we want to be in the future. And I got to admit, I had some pushback, particularly about the second part. I mean, I shared on the 9th, I had a hard time with an image for bylaws, And it's like, bylaws aren't supposed to look like that, but I'm glad they do. And we've often said things that aren't the way other people think it should be. So that's a little background in terms of it. Read to a commission. One of my concerns is the commission solicited input over the last several years from congregations, but we've been kind of distracted by something called the pandemic over the last couple of years, which is why we haven't been really looking at this more closely over time. So that's all part of the history.
Okay, Gemma, we'll do a couple more.
I've been reading that magazine of the UU, the World,
Yeah.
and in there is the 8th principle. Now,
Right.
what's all that about?
Well, the 8th Principle Project was a different process that started mostly at the congregational level. And my summary of the 8th Principle, I don't have a copy in front of me here, calls for us to make as one of our primary principles commitment to anti-racism and anti-oppression work, an accountable process, okay? And many congregations adopted that. And the Eugene congregation, its board initially, and then affirmed by the congregation, approved the 8th Principle. 8th Principle, in my interpretation summary, would be we need to walk our talk and not just talk about some vague principles. Well, this new version includes some of that call to action. And one of the original founders, I invite you to look at UUA.org and then look up in bylaw change. And if you get to the, you'll get to a video. I can try to put the link in the UMQuest. You'll get to a video from African-American clergywoman, UU clergywoman, Paula Cole-Jones, who was one of the original writers of the Eighth Principle, saying, if we adopt this, we don't need the Eighth Principle because some of the language about responsibility is in the new statement. Some of the concerns about cultural appropriation and some of the things that was intended to address, she feels are, so that the Eighth Principle wouldn't be needed in this new articulation. Sean, one, and then we'll wrap up.
Two things. One, you mentioned several times that ideas don't die, but they go dormant. And that reminded me of a quote from Rumi. Don't think that in winter the garden loses its ecstasy. The roots down there are riotous.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and sometimes the seasons of life are very long seasons, is the reality. Yes, thank you.
And the other thing that struck me was JLA's statement that there's no such thing as a divine, immaculate
is his
conception of ideas. But there is conception of ideas because ideas happen. And so if they're not immaculate, they're probably messy. That's how it happens.
Yeah, but they also came from somewhere. There was something that fed them that, that led to the birth of that idea, so. Do we want to wrap up this part and sing? And then there'll be time for more conversation over coffee. And anybody who wants to yak with this stuff about me more, that's part of why I have office hours on Tuesday afternoons. I like talking about theology and UU history and stuff. So, but I also like even more to sing together. So I invite you to rise in body and in spirit for number 311 in our hymnal, Let It Be a Dance. This is for me too.
Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Let a dancing song be heard. Play the music, say the word, and fill the sky with sailing birds. Let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. Learn to follow, learn to lead. Feel the rhythm, feel the need. To reap the harvest, plant the seed. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Let it be a dance. Everybody turn and spin. Let your body learn to bend. And like a willow with the wind, let it be a dance, let it be a dance, let it be a dance. A child is born, the old must die. A time for joy, a time to cry. Take it as it passes by. Let it be a dance. Let it be a dance we do. May I have this dance with you through the good times and the bad times too. Share the laughter, bear the pain, and round we go again. Let it be a dance.
Please remain standing for our closing words of benediction. Adapted from that Universalist, early Universalist, John Murray. Go out into the highways and byways, give the people something of your new vision.
You may possess a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of all people, and understanding to the hearts and mind of all people.
Give them not hell, but hope and courage.
Preach the everlasting love of God.
Salam, shalom, amen, and blessed be. And now, as is the tradition of this congregation, we have our closing song. Go in peace, go in love.